Early voting got underway on Monday. Voters in the 18th district will choose who to fill an open seat for a year. That is if U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson swears in whoever wins. And we will get to that and what it has to do with the federal government shutdown, among other developments in politics, in our regular Wednesday political roundup. Today, with the University of Houston Hobby School of Public Affairs Renee Cross and UH political science professor and party politics co-host Brandon Rottinghouse. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Craig.
Okay, let's start with the 18th district special election. Renee, the Hobby School put out a survey on it in recent days. What did you find out?
Well, keep in mind we have 16 candidates for this particular race, but we do have some clear front runners. Christian Menifee is polling at 27%, Amanda Edwards at 23%, and Jolanda Jones at 15%. Then all the other candidates drop off into the single digits. For Menifee and Edwards, this is quite a significant increase from the survey that we did last summer. Of course, more time has went by, and they're advertising and so forth. But it certainly looks like there will be a runoff.
Yeah, and again, just a reminder to everybody, if no candidate receives 50% of the vote in the general election, then it goes to a runoff election between the top two vote getters.
That's correct.
And so maybe this is more of the race for second place because it maybe doesn't matter who has the first place, has the most, which is odd, but there it is. I bring up the question of House Speaker Johnson because Arizona's Attorney General Chris Mays confirmed Tuesday afternoon that her office has filed a lawsuit against Speaker Johnson for not swearing in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, who was elected to succeed her late father, Congressman Raul Grijalva. First of all, why is Speaker Johnson not swearing her in?
Well, there's a lot of speculation about the fact that if she is sworn in, then there would be enough votes to have a support for the release of the Epstein files in a more robust way. The speaker has implied that they already are doing that and that that's in process, but this is certainly something that has made the rounds on the socials. So there's certainly that speculation. The other is that just without as much voting power, Democrats are not in as good a position to be able to negotiate and bargain. The House is going to have to probably repass a continuing resolution that they passed before. So we're coming close to that November 21st deadline where the continuing resolution would have essentially taken over. So this means that there is a fundamental need for Democrats to unify, and probably it means a slightly different bargaining position for them in this. So there are a lot of reasons why this is the case. And the fact that Arizona is suing is sort of unprecedented. It's a sort of fascinating legal story, but obviously the political implications are pretty serious.
Renee, can he be legally implicated to swear her in, or is this a circumstance where the speaker could just slow play this as long as he wants?
Well, I think he thinks he can slow play it. Like Brandon said, this is unprecedented. I honestly don't know. I do think he is going to try to stretch it out to the nth degree.
He is claiming that he will swear her in the first Monday after the federal government reopens. So is it ultimately maybe this is just a talking point as much as anything? Here's another thing to just kind of pile on to. Well, this is if the Democrats hadn't shut down the government, then we wouldn't have this delay. Is his argument.
It's pretty strategically smart for them to do it this way. The legal case is a little fuzzy. I don't know that there's any real legs here. The speaker has a lot of authority over the chamber, and so it's unlikely that this would go anywhere. But both sides are looking for every talking point that they can. I think, as you said, that this is really a negotiating tactic, and ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. The shutdown continues. We're in our fourth week, and there needs to be some kind of movement here. And I think both sides are looking for any kind of leverage they can get.
Are we any closer to a resolution?
Barely. The Senate Republicans went to the White House this week and came back with some pretty smart-looking swag bags that I think definitely underscore the nature of kind of the urgency of things. But I do think that they're probably inching closer. Like I said, the chamber had passed, the House had passed this resolution to essentially have this sort of short-term funding. That is at the point now where it's not practical anymore, so they're going to have to repass it, which means the House will will have to come back in session, which they're not. So there is, I think, some urgency here to make that happen. Democrats are still holding line when it comes to the funding for Obamacare and those subsidies. There are some Senate seats that may be in contention here. Georgia is seeing their increase in those in their Obamacare sort of costs. You're also seeing this in Maine. So there is enough, I think, pressure on some swing members that they're willing to push on this. So I think that they're edging closer, but I don't see any real resolution very soon.
And in 2 weeks, money will be cut off from federal workers. So I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on them to come to some kind of agreement.
What sort of impacts are we seeing here in the Houston area as a result of the shutdown? I mean, in the fourth week, I would think by now there's some pretty clear signs of an impact.
There definitely are. I mean, for one, the state is probably not going to get about $600 million in SNAP funding, which means there are a lot of families who aren't going to have access to this that they otherwise would. So it's a slow trickle, but definitely one that ends up being in the laps of a lot of members who are incumbents. And so Republicans and Democrats alike are going to have to defend this and their positioning. And that's becoming increasingly challenging in the face of public dissent over this.
What are some of the other developments you're following in election news beyond the current cycle? I mean, there are lots of little odds and ends going on out there, aren't there?
Lots of little odds and ends. Well, on the state front, we have a prominent Democratic state representative who has jumped into the gubernatorial race, Gina Hinojosa from Austin. She's originally from the Valley and is quite the firecracker. I think there's a very good chance that she will be very competitive for the Democratic nomination. Her personality and energy, I think, will pump up Democrats.
I think Democrats are looking for a way out of the wilderness. They obviously haven't won since 1994 statewide. That was when Jurassic Park was in theaters the first time. So that's been a long time, Craig. I think the Hinojosa has got some ability to rally Latinos, and that's something that's huge. You saw about a 20-point drop in support for the Democratic Party among Latinos from 18 to 24. Donald Trump in exit polling did much better in 24 than he had done in past elections. So that's the biggest swing vote. And if she can rally that, then Democrats' fortunes would be in a much better position. You have to, though, see Greg Abbott's $90 million war chest as pretty formidable. She had $25,000 in her bank account, which is not going to get the job done. Abbott might be vulnerable. If you look at some of the numbers, his approval ratings are basically as bad as they've been since he took office. And there's a growing sense that Texas is sort of on the wrong track. So you can read into that maybe a position where Democrats can use that to take on Greg Abbott, but it was a very long uphill battle.
Meantime, Brandon, you sent me a note yesterday that I'll admit I did not have time to learn the details of. It simply said, Texas Senate hopeful calls opponent demonic.
Yes.
All right. Give us the details.
Well, it is an interesting story that does have implications for campaigning and artificial intelligence. The short story is that in this North Texas Senate district, that a woman who is a communications officer for Patriot Mobile, Lewa McGans, is running against John Huffman, who's a former mayor of South Lake. There was a doctored image of her with an upside-down cross, and there was a accusation that this was done by her opponent, by the Huffman campaign. They deny it, so it's been a little bit of a sort of online social battle about who did what and what it means. The ultimate, I think, impact of this is that it is incumbent upon campaigns to police themselves and maybe to some degree the people who are their supporters. That's hard to do, especially when there's no guardrails. There was an effort in this last legislative session to introduce legislation that would put these guardrails up. Former Speaker Dade Phelan had a bill that basically said that if there are doctored images in a campaign, then they have to be disclosed as such. And any kind of variation or violation of that meant that there would be criminal penalties. I think that there's something like that needed, not only in Texas, but also nationally, because there is a growing problem of these doctored images becoming very real for people and manipulating their sense of purpose.
And shared at times by some very high-profile people.
Yep.
One comes to mind. I believe he's the president.
That's so true. Yeah, and it's one thing to do it to yourself and have, your image be part of this, kind of presentation, but it's another for it to be done to an opponent. And so there's a long history of there being these manipulated images, but I do think that this is a signal that there has to be something, because the technology will only get better. And I think as partisanship grows and social media becomes so dominant in terms of how politics operates, that there has to be some kind of limitation.
And I guess I should clarify. So President Trump shared something on social media, an image that sort of doctored his own
Yes.
image, but it also included music by Kenny Loggins, and apparently Loggins himself was upset about that. That we have a long history of. I recall past campaigns attempting to use Bruce Springsteen's music in political ads or during rallies, and he's objected to that. Things like that have happened throughout. As long as there's been popular music, there has been a political candidate or elected official seeking to use it in some way. So,
I think one thing that's notable about that last video put out by President Trump is that it wasn't necessarily just targeting an opponent. It was targeting a whole group of people that disagree with him.
Meantime, the redistricting fight continues. The latest state taking it up appears to be North Carolina. They have a long history, a recent history of doing so. Republican legislative leaders there say they want to redraw the maps to gain one GOP seat. Democrats argue it's another case of racial gerrymandering. They say it would dilute the black vote by splitting the population up from one district into two. It is noteworthy because this would mark the 7th congressional map that North Carolina has taken up since 2016. It's the 5th already this decade. If you think about that, you realize that they have, if they take this up now before their next election, they'll have more maps than elections in the last 5 years. Right. That seems problematic to me.
It is, and we know that when there are these shifts, that voters are confused, and a confused voter is a non-voter. And so that, I think, is pretty obvious in terms of this. And it does have relevance to what we're talking about here in Texas. The 18th district, which there will be the special election for, will be very different when there's a new election in the following November, because about half the people in the 18th won't be in the 18th anymore. This frequent change means that voters are not sure where they're supposed to be. And although there are these great online tools to help people, it's still not the case that it is useful. I think ultimately what's happening is that people are waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on this Louisiana case that is about the Voting Rights Act. And if the court rules, as a lot of people anticipate they will, that the Voting Rights Act no longer has purchase when it comes to protecting racial districts, then it could be that all of these changes are going to stick, and we'll see more and more changes because all of these states are going to see exactly what Louisiana saw and what North Carolina saw and what Texas saw, which is that we can draw these districts in ways that benefit us politically.
Which also means then whoever has the majority, I guess each state determines who draws those maps, but most of them it's state legislatures, right, that are determining this. So whoever has the majority from one cycle to the next can just keep redrawing the maps.
That's so true. The only defense against that is that there are some states that have a commission that does it, sometimes elected, sometimes appointed, but those are shown to be more fair maps. And so that's the way to go. But as you said, most states don't do it that way.
Why don't we just hand them all to Renee? You just do all 50 states.
I'm a great artist, actually.
You can draw within the lines. That's the key thing there.
Or not.
Right. Brandon Rottinghouse is the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. You can catch it Friday nights at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday nights at 8 on Houston Public Media TV 8, and of course it's available on YouTube as well and wherever you get your podcasts. He's also a political science professor at the University of Houston. That is where Renee Cross is Senior Director of the Hobby School of Public Affairs. Thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.